The Citadel Code, the philosophy of the medieval knight and noble. Chapter 1. The foundations of chivalric philosophy. In the stone heart of a medieval citadel, where thick battlements rose defiantly against the sky, and the great hall echoed with the solemn oaths of armored men, the knight and noble lived by a philosophy far older and deeper than any single lifetime. This was the code of chivalry, a complete way of life that fused martial skill with moral discipline, Christian duty with feudal loyalty, and personal honor with the sacred responsibility to defend order. Far from being mere romantic tales of knights in shining armor, chivalry emerged as a practical response to the harsh realities of feudal Europe between the late 11th and 15th centuries. It sought to civilize the warrior class, transforming potentially destructive armed elites into guardians of faith, realm, and the common good. The term chivalry itself derives from the Old French chevalerie, rooted in cheval, meaning horse. It originally referred to the mounted warrior elite, the heavy cavalry who formed the backbone of medieval armies. By the High Middle Ages, however, it had evolved into a broader ethical framework. Historians trace its formal development to northern France between roughly 1170 and 1220, though its roots stretch back further to the Carolingian era and the idealization of Charlemagne's cavalry. As the feudal system took hold after the collapse of centralized Roman authority, society organized around land grants in exchange for military service. Knights and nobles, often of noble birth or elevated through prowess, received fiefs and owed allegiance to their lords. Without a guiding code, these heavily armed horsemen could become little more than armed bandits preying on the weak. Chivalry provided the necessary restraints and aspirations. At its core, chivalric philosophy rejected raw power for power's sake. It insisted that the knight and noble's strength existed for a higher purpose: to serve God, protect the church, defend the realm, and shield those unable to defend themselves. Essential virtues included courage in battle, loyalty to one's lord and comrades, honor in all dealings, justice tempered by mercy, generosity to the less fortunate, and unwavering Christian piety. These were not abstract ideals confined to literature. They were lived daily within the walls of citadels and castles across Europe. The citadel itself embodied the philosophy. Unlike the outer bailey or town walls, the citadel served as the ultimate inner stronghold, the last refuge during sieges, and the administrative and residential core of lordship. Here, thick stone towers, deep moats, drawbridges, and fortified gates created a world apart. Inside, the knight and noble trained, prayed, governed, and prepared for war. The citadel symbolized both physical defense and moral order. Its unyielding walls mirrored the knight and noble's steadfast character, while its great hall hosted feasts, councils, and the transmission of the code to the next generation of squires. Daily life in the citadel reinforced the foundations of chivalry from sunrise to compline. A typical day began before dawn, with the knight rising for prayer or overseeing the arming of horses and men. Training occupied much of the morning: sword drills, lance practice on the quintain, horsemanship exercises in the bailey. These were not mere exercises in violence. They built the disciplined prowess, essential to protecting the weak rather than exploiting them. Mid-morning often brought attendance at Mass in the Citadel chapel, where the knight laid his sword upon the altar as an offering, reminding himself that martial skill was a divine gift to be used righteously. Noon might find him in the great hall adjudicating disputes among vassals or hearing petitions from peasants. Here the virtue of justice came alive. Decisions weighed evidence and custom, balancing severity with compassion. Afternoons could involve hunting to hone skills and provide meat, or overseeing estate management, ensuring fields were tended, stores secured against famine, and defenses maintained. Evenings brought counsel with the Lord, discussion of strategy, or feasts where tales of heroic deeds reinforced the code. Throughout, loyalty remained paramount. The knight swore fealty not as empty ritual, but as a binding oath before God and men. This philosophy did not arise in a vacuum. It drew from several converging influences. First, the martial traditions of Germanic warrior cultures emphasized bravery and loyalty to one's lord. Second, the Christianization of Europe, accelerated by the Carolingian Renaissance, infused these traditions with religious purpose. Knights were called to defend the faith, especially during the Crusades beginning in 1095, where fighting for the Holy Land elevated the warrior's role to that of Miles Christi, soldier of Christ. Third, the rise of courtly literature and troubadour poetry in the 12th century added layers of refinement. Works such as the Song of Roland, c. 1100, portrayed the ideal knight as fiercely loyal, courageous to the point of death, and devoted to his lord and God. Later, Ramon Lully's Book of the Order of Chivalry, c. 1275, provided a more systematic treatise, outlining the knight's duties in clear moral terms. Practical military needs also drove the code's development. As tournaments became popular social and training events from the 12th century onward, rules emerged to prevent chaos and encourage honorable conduct. Commanders recognized that undisciplined knights posed risks to their own forces and to civilian populations. A professional code helped maintain cohesion, encourage generous treatment of defeated enemies when politically useful, and uphold the reputation of the noble class. Figures like William Marshall, often called the greatest knight that ever lived, embodied these ideals in practice. Rising from tournament champion to regent of England, Marshall demonstrated unwavering loyalty, courage, and honor, even when serving multiple masters across shifting alliances. His life showed that chivalry, while aspirational, could be lived with remarkable consistency. Yet the philosophy was never a rigid legal code enforced uniformly. It remained an informal, evolving set of expectations shaped by region, time, and circumstance. In times of crusade or holy war, piety and defense of the church took precedence. During feudal conflicts, loyalty to one's lord often weighed heaviest. In peacetime within the Citadel, governance and generosity came to the fore. What unified all expressions was the conviction that the armed noble held a sacred trust. Strength without virtue descended into tyranny. Virtue without strength left the innocent defenseless. The Citadel stood as both literal and symbolic center of this worldview. Its design, concentric walls, commanding towers, secure keep, reflected layered defense, mirroring the layered virtues of the knight and noble. Outer walls protected the wider lands and populace. Inner citadel protected the lord, his family, and the core garrison. Similarly, the knight and noble's outer prowess in arms protected the realm, while his inner character, honor, piety, self-mastery, safeguarded his soul and the moral order he upheld. Young pages and squires raised within these walls absorbed the code through observation and instruction. They learned that knighthood demanded not only the ability to wield a sword, but the wisdom to know when and why to draw it. By the 14th and 15th centuries, as plate armor reached its peak and gunpowder began to challenge traditional warfare, chivalry acquired more romantic and idealized tones in literature. Arthurian legends, chansons de geste, and illuminated manuscripts spread the image of the perfect knight across Europe. Yet at its foundations, the philosophy remained grounded in harsh reality, the need to restrain violence, foster loyalty, and maintain social order in an age of constant threat from invasion, rebellion, and famine. In the torchlit halls of the Citadel, the knight and noble understood his place in a divine hierarchy. God ruled the heavens, kings and emperors ruled by divine right, lords governed their domains, and knights executed justice on the ground. Each level bore responsibility proportional to its power. The philosophy taught that neglecting this duty invited chaos, both earthly and spiritual. Thus, every act within the Citadel walls, from polishing armor to hearing mass to rendering judgment, became an act of philosophy in motion. This foundational vision of chivalry offered coherence amid the turbulence of the medieval world. It provided a moral compass for men trained from boyhood to kill and conquer. It elevated the brutal necessities of warfare into a vocation of service, and it insisted that true nobility arose not merely from birth or battlefield success, but from daily adherence to virtues that transcended self-interest. In the stone citadel, where wind whistled through arrow slits and banners stirred above the battlements, the knight and noble stood as living proof that strength, rightly ordered by faith and honor, could become a force for stability and good. The code's endurance across centuries testifies to its power. Though specific customs varied, Norman knights differed somewhat from those in the Holy Roman Empire or Iberian Peninsula. The underlying principles remained remarkably consistent: courage without recklessness, loyalty without servility, piety without hypocrisy, and protection of the weak as sacred duty. These foundations would be elaborated in the virtues explored in subsequent chapters, but they all rest upon this central truth. The knight and noble existed not to dominate, but to defend, not to glorify himself, but to uphold a higher order under God.